Boom. What's up, everybody? Testing. 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Good morning to the people in the United States or anywhere else in a time zone where it might be morning. Especially people on the west side of the continent, where it's very early for some of you, especially for anyone who might really like to sleep in. Well, if you like to sleep in, but you also like free lectures about the state of education and the future of learning, fuck you. It's time to get up. Pour yourself a cup of coffee and good morning. But if you are joining from other places on the planet that are way ahead of here in terms of either economic development or time zones, then welcome. I'm glad that you were able to join. I know a lot of people, when I do these late streams, I mean, for me, it's like 8 p.m. It can be like 3 a.m. for someone else. And so the stream that I'm doing tonight with the Swilitariat, I'll be joining him for a live reaction video to his, a live reaction stream to his first video essay. Should be fun. Should be interesting. I don't really know what to expect just yet. So, hello there, Izul. Hi there, Scott Murto. Thank you. Looking forward to learnings today. Nice. All right. Izul says, my school had a tradition called old-fashioned school day, where we would all wear overalls and get slapped with a ruler all the time to mimic this type of environment. Cool. Yeah, well, we're going to talk about traditional education. Then we're going to talk about what the current state of education. I would say, well, I've got a lot of things to say. I don't know that I have any single strong thesis. And if you're coming to this stream excited to get told that college is pointless and that you don't need to waste your time with it, or if you're coming to have higher education and its necessity validated for you in some way, either way, you'll probably leave dissatisfied. But if you are coming to this stream as a critical thinker who is just generally interested to hear a report from someone who's been on the ground, who's been in the thick of it, who's recently graduated with a master's, but has been through the bureaucratic acrobatics, as I like to call it. I should have coined that term. I should have written my thesis about that. Jeez Louise, but I didn't. Oh well. But if you are here for firsthand reports, you're going to get that. If you're here for a little bit more of a theoretical understanding of critical pedagogy, which is a fancy word for how we teach shit, then you'll get some of that as well. So it shows that I'm dropping frames, 64% over the last 2 minutes. Okay, so I need to hear from folks. I can't continue until I know how bad is it. Like, am I lagging so bad that it's not worth it and I should do the stream some other time? Scott Murdo, Izul, you there? I don't want to have to. I don't want to be talking if it's not working. You know what I mean? This is bullshit. I lowered my settings. Okay, so I did a test stream last night, and I've lowered my settings lower than it was yesterday, but it looks like my lag today is worse than it was last night. Not good. Not good. Not excited to see that. Okay, before I make the meme go away, I just wanted to make sure you see it. I think it's funny. It totally speaks to, I think, a lot of us right now. Trump loses, smiley face person. Biden wins, same person, frowning with a stink eye. And I really like it. I'm like, who is this person? That is quite the intense face this person has. Let's zoom in on that. Look at that. Look at that deadpan. Let's zoom in on that deadpan. Yes, that is how we feel right now, Biden. Okay. I don't know if this is even working. And Scott, Izul, Deleuze and Guitars, if you don't say anything, I'm just going to cut the stream off. If nobody says anything, I'm just going to close out because I need to know it's working. Hey, this is the internet. I'm not your host on a television show where we have a whole production team and we can do all of these things and have it all streamlined ahead of time. No, and also I wanted to talk about not just the state of education and the future of learning. Oh, it's pretty bad, huh, DDD? It reloads every 3 seconds, but we can hear everything you say. Oh, okay. So if you can hear me unbroken, then it must just be painful to watch. Yeah, so, but speaking of the fact that I am doing like 50 different jobs at once just to stream right now, instead of being simply a host on the set of a television, where you have, the other 49 people doing other tasks, speaks to the situation we find ourselves in now. And that's why I called this stream The Addition of Labor and the Future of Learning. Now, I would have called it the state of education and the future of learning, but I wanted to use the term addition of learning because I think addition of what was it, labor? I think I wanted to say the addition of labor because people are used to thinking of the division of labor as being one of those ultra sophisticated, hyper refined aspects of the development of industrial society. But we live in what they call post-industrial society now. Yes. And so what's different? And if you read or listened to the excerpts that I've shared on my YouTube channel, I did share one called Depressive Hedonia. And in the description for the scheduled event today, I had linked the excerpts that were going to be referenced throughout the course of this stream. And Depressive Hedonia is from, it's a term that Mark Fisher coins and uses from Capitalist Realism, which is a classic, instant classic little book. The reason it's an instant classic is because it resonates with a lot of people. At the one point, it is a sort of a lot of research, that he draws off of as to the state of things today. But at the same time, there's also a lot of very descriptive, almost poetic kind of reflections on the state of the world. And part of it, there's this chapter where he's talking about higher education and how bad it is. So, okay. Thanks, blah, 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 for saying it is working all right. Occasional skip. And Scott Murto says it's tolerable. Okay, Izul, as long as you can hear me, I'll keep going. I really, personally, I don't really watch YouTube videos. I listen to them almost always. I don't really watch. And a lot of people play video games while listening. So I hope for the people who really need the visual of my mouth aren't too thrown off. Yeah, it skips every 20 seconds or so. That's terrible. Hey there, Dr. Brinbrin. I'm doing pretty good. So it looks like Dr. Brinbrin is the first to hop into my personal site, which is theoryplebe.com/live if you want to get into the on-screen chat, which is kind of annoying because it keeps just saying lost connection up here. Oh well. I don't think there's anything I can do to lower my settings while I'm streaming, but let me go ahead and check. No. The answer is no. I would have to end this stream and fix my settings. So, although I have stopped talking about what we're going to talk about on the stream just to do an empathy and to try to look out for whoever might get thrown off by this lag, I will now, nevertheless, move forward with this presentation. I feel weird calling it a lecture because it's more like coffee hours where I was planning on talking about something that's on my chest, right? Sitting on my chest. Attempting to reconnect to persist, rest the site is stable, try refreshing or clearing your browser's cache. Jeez. My personal site's not doing too well because it's going to keep saying that it lost connection every time it does that leg every 20 seconds. Whatever. Anyway, so let's get back to the addition of labor. I want to talk about this. So I think that it's something that will probably resonate with many of you. I'm going to go ahead and make the thing on screen go away for now because you don't need to see what I'm writing. All right. So the addition of labor. So let's think back. What is the division of labor? We were talking about the sophisticated and ever refined means of the division of labor, which is something that Ricardo and Adam Smith, those classical political economists, they found a lot of hope and efficiency and productivity in the division of labor. And of course, when time and energy are limited for human beings and you need to be able to get things done, like, farm and get food to people or make saddles so people can ride their horses places to get places faster, whatever it might be, the division of labor can really speed things up. And so, when we think of the extreme, to where Marx gets critical of it, we have people who their entire job is just putting something on something, right? So it's like, if you're streamlining and being efficient and dividing up the labor, that to say put out a fire, you might do what they call a fireman drill, where it's like one person hands a bucket of water to the next person and they hand it to the next person and they hand it to the next person, and it's a lot faster than each person carrying an individual bucket of water. Obviously that's a little old-fashioned, but it's a good example of what is happening at a larger scale in a factory, where you end up having a person whose entire job is to put nuts onto engines, right? It's the same spot, right? And the work becomes monotonous and grueling, and you get arthritis in your hands and spine, and it goes out, and eventually you're fucked unless you have a lot of worker protections. And even if you have a lot of protections, healthcare, and a good pension or whatever, the issue is still going to be that your life world, your inner world, your creativity and your intellect and your social and empathetic capabilities have all been structurally stultified by a life that was devoted to putting your most valuable resource and asset, your time and energy, into somebody else's pockets, where they are cashing in on promises that you'll be there to do things, and they're taking those promises that you fulfill to the bank, and getting rich off of you. And I'd say it's fine in the sense that, it's what it is. It's not great. It's not the worst thing. There are definitely worse things, but it's still pretty bad to be in a society of people who are reduced to being cogs in a machine, is the cliche sort of way that people talk about it. But specialization is part of what comes along with that division of labor. And specialization usually means, oh, well, I'm the heart surgeon and you're the plumber, and everybody has a specific role. And when you meet people in the society, you ask them, what do you do for a living? And the person says, oh, well, I'm this. I do this for a living. This is how I make money. And then people decide how much they have to respect you based off of that. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're a mechanic. Gotcha. Okay. And, there's a lot of things that I think probably most people attracted to my work don't like about that situation, because we are, or at least try to be, more than just what we do for a living, or what we do to survive, right? And this whole idea that, a meaningful life is finding a way to add value to your society, doing something that people need, that makes you come alive and feel fulfilled. That sounds good, but what that often means is people spend the entirety of high school, even before that, just imagining what they think they would be fulfilled doing, and then making sure that all of their learning or studies are kind of focused in that direction. And a lot of times, if a person is, for instance, going to be, say, going to go into med school or something, then maybe like you heard about philosophy or art or something and you thought that seemed cool, and so you took a class or something, and it was an elective in college or something like that, and you're like, yeah, but you didn't really have the time to study those things because, first of all, you had no plausible way forward that you could envision in life to being able to continuously go back to and work through and expand off of everything that you were learning in that class, because your horizon of possibilities has been limited by the time and energy that has been divided and dominated into and towards this career path. And so that is the classical division of labor and where it got us. That's my quick summary of it. And what I'm calling the addition of labor is what we do now, where one person is doing the work of 50 people. So, even in the 90s, I don't really know, I wasn't really paying attention. A graphic designer was different than a video producer. And a video producer and a graphic designer, they were separate from an audio engineer. This is just like a basic example. Well, now, if you want to do anything, you've got to do all three functions, right? Unless you work for CNN. But even then, who knows? They're always looking for ways to, as the software, the learning curve that blocks you from just being able to hop in and do, work away on it. That learning curve, as it becomes less steep and more accessible to people, you're expected to do more. And so no longer having a lot of experience in like this or that area is enough. No longer will it suffice to say that you are able to be the graphic design person. Now you have to be the graphic design, marketing, and video production person. That's the addition of labor. That's what I mean by the addition of labor. Now, before I jump into critiquing the neoliberal, institutions of higher education and all of that, this is all so kind of preliminary. This everything I'm going to be talking about here. I want to talk a little bit about my own experience at the university. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say I don't like this chat at all. Let me see really quick if I can get the YouTube chat on screen, and if so, then we're just going to go with that. I think that will work. Go ahead and test if you're on Twitch or YouTube right now. Tell me, because I am restreaming this. Let me know. I'll jump into my little background with the university here in a second, but my personal site, because of this connectivity issue, is just constantly saying connected, disconnected, connected, disconnected, and it's terrible. And so I have half a mind just to not have it on screen, because it's just looks terrible. Yeah, see? Just did it again.
Disgusting!
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just get rid of my chat altogether. We're not gonna have chat on screen. It's fine. Don't need it. I'll figure out how to optimize my settings better, and we'll get it next time. Don't worry about it. For the meantime, I'm gonna get the browser back here on screen. I wrote a quick little thing just to say, where I wrote a little summary of the stuff that I did. So I said, I'm not anti-school. There's something useful in all the people who are, but I've experienced being unschooled, which is to say working without concepts. So I was homeschooled, and as a result, I have a sort of different kind of opinion about homeschooling than what a lot of the critical pedagogy people who might be pro homeschooling would tell you. They would say, so people like Ivan Illich here, who wrote Deschooling Society. He had been a priest. He became a philosopher and a sort of activist, and he and people like Paulo Freire and Bell Hooks and all these other people got into teaching to transgress, and they were against the factory or banking models of schooling, and a lot of their critiques are good, but also a lot of the things that they just uncritically and dogmatically presume are also problematic to me. I have a variety of issues with all three of those thinkers, but at the same time I appreciate their contributions. But one of the things that they tend to just kind of think that it's just a good thing, the homeschooling. Well, my personal experience has told me that no, it's different everywhere you go, depending on the situation. There is no one model of homeschooling. Every kind of homeschooling is so different from the next that you actually can't compare homeschooling to public or private regular educational institutions. You can't, because they're also different. And sometimes it's like, oh, you've got these rich parents who are paying for a bunch of tutors, and the kid gets to take a bunch of these private classes and all of this stuff. That's one thing. But then, or other times you've got parents who have their kids in learning co-ops, where you've got a bunch of parents who have college degrees who have formed a teaching co-op, and they all teach their various specialties and interests to one another's children. That's epic. I think that's really cool. And then, what really kind of sucks a lot of the time is this sort of they'll all be in the same religion, and hold to the same basic set of political premises. And that's I don't know if it's too much of a problem when the kids are younger, but there's a certain point when that becomes a problem, because children need to, as they develop, be able to see a lot of role models and mentors able to disagree on fundamental issues. They need to be able to see that. So, at least I would think so. And I could probably develop arguments for all of these things, but I'm just kind of doing a sort of summary and trying to get to a point here. So what I'm saying is that I've experienced being unschooled, and I said that that's like working without concepts. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that it's like living in the dark. It's like you take reality for what it looks like, for what's given. And you have a wild imagination, but no real sense for its limits or being able to apply them to reality. That's my kind of impression of being unschooled and working without concepts and having no real socialization or understanding of the way the world works. And you're not really being prepared for that. There's a lot of stuff, and we'll get a little bit more into this, that you learn in school that isn't being taught in an explicit way. For example, what I just said about it's important to have a lot of role models or social reference points that may agree or disagree on various things with one another, and will have different kinds of personalities. You'll click with some of them, you won't click with other ones. You'll realize you have to work around certain things with certain ones. Those are just, that's being human, that's being in a society, and that's part of being socialized. And if you're not getting that, that could be a problem if your only social reference points are your parents and people in movies, for instance, if you're even allowed to watch movies. And some homeschool people aren't allowed to watch movies, and so that's a whole other thing. Then I said, I've been a student. So it just, it was like after after I did not graduate because I was homeschooled and so I didn't really have high school credits, I got a GED, and then I worked for not quite a decade, and then went to college. And when I went to college, I was a student. I was an administrative assistant. I was a student government representative on faculty boards. I was a president of a variety of clubs. I taught for 3 years at Boise State University, and I even worked for professors and administrative assistants by doing their yard work or construction, which means that, like, people in the philosophy department or in the history department, you know, I worked for these professors. I have gotten to have conversations with professors in their office hours. You know, they take me out to dinner or lunch or coffee, so we could just have conversations about the subject material that we were interested in talking about. And I think that's one of the most valuable aspects of what you get in a college situation, is that you get to have like one-on-one time with these people because they have office hours and they're usually pretty quick to let's get some coffee. But also I've worked for them. I've been in their houses. I've seen the way that a variety of professors at that university, the way they live. I've heard a lot of the drama from the, you know, what it's like within the academy, coming from the lips of professors, and then I've gotten the other side from the administrative assistants, who I have worked for multiple administrative assistants. And so, if you don't know what an administrative assistant is, in the sense that I'm talking about, the specific people that I'm talking about, I mean being like the locus of information and scheduling, and basically the secretary for a group of professors. Basically all of the professors in a department, they work through the administrative assistant. The administrative assistant is basically everybody's secretary. And so that person gets to know who's rude, who's, you know, to workers. That person gets to know who won't work with who and why, or at least, you know, will know competing versions of that. And so there's a lot of tea that has been spilled on me while I've worked for these people. And so it's amazing that I've been studying the critique of higher education and of general schooling in society at the same time that I have been behind the scenes, so to speak, actually working for these people as a laborer, but also as a student adjunct who then graduated and continued on as a teaching adjunct for a little while. And if you don't know what an adjunct is, it's basically a person who doesn't really have the expertise, qualifications, or like background education yet developed to justify paying a living wage, apparently. In reality, it's usually people who you just haven't been in the game long enough, and so they get to fuck you over. And so adjuncts, hiring 3 adjuncts to do the work of 1 professor so that you can continuously displace professors with people who are not protected by tenure, who have probably 20 years of bureaucratic acrobatics before they get to the possibility of having tenure and therefore have no freedom of speech. That's the par for the course, as I say. Like, that's just the way things are these days, is that professors are continuously being displaced by people who are only paid part-time and don't even get health care. So I've done that too. And what else was I saying on here? Yeah, so anyway, I've been all over the place. I've seen this thing from a lot of different angles. And I'm not against higher education, period. Like some people I talk to, they really get excited about critiquing higher education because it means they don't have to go. And maybe they got told their whole life that they do have to go. And that's stupid, because no, you don't have to go. But at the same time, there's been a sort of devaluation of the university to where it has been reduced to nothing but a career advancement machine. And insofar as you see it that way, it is not necessarily the best thing for you. There are a lot of ways to get higher paying jobs and pursue a career in the corporate world without having a degree. And, like people typically will just list, names like, oh, Steve Jobs didn't graduate college. He actually dropped out. Yeah, he dropped out of Reed and then went and stayed in ashrams in India, meditating and doing acid probably, and then came back and started doing capitalism, right? Well, Steve Jobs also had like a super advanced upbringing in terms of education. Like he went to a very nice, private school. And so in a sort of sense, his college education had been before college, because if you go to normal college or university, but you're coming from a regular subpar, public education institution that has been, it has little to no support, dwindling support in terms of teacher pay and teachers being overworked and not having resources and all of those things. And you come into the university, then, there's a lot there for you. But if you've also already had, gone deep with the various fields of human consciousness, whether they be science or art, philosophy, humanities, social sciences, whatever it might be, then you have a lot more resources at your disposal than your average person. But if you're more like me and you have been conceptually deprived through ignorance, negligence, structural stultification, these things that leave us without the conceptual means to make sense of our world from a variety of perspectives, then the university might be a last sort of ditch effort to be able to get that experience. And I think that that's important if you can. So at the one time, I totally agree that Obama was not the best, that he failed to deliver on some of his biggest promises, shutting down the Patriot Act, or shutting down Guantanamo Bay, or shutting down the war in Iraq or Afghanistan. Sure. But the Pell Grants being increased, that turned out to be good for me, because without the Pell Grants, I wouldn't have gone to college, I don't think. And so as a sort of last-ditch effort, because I'd kind of exhausted what I saw as all of my career possibilities, I went to college. And the Pell Grants made that more affordable. I still had to go into debt, but it was way more affordable this way. Can we read this somewhere, says Jeremy Boom? These notes that I have up on screen, it's really only like 3 paragraphs. And it's not, most of what I'm saying is not coming from that. You could always transcribe this, but that would be probably a huge pain in the butt. But I could at least paste probably into my Discord or something like that, what I have written down. So, where was I just going with that? Sorry, Jeremy. I don't normally get derailed by looking at chat, and it's not your fault. This is on me. What did I just do? What was I talking about? Help me out, chat. Are you also drinking coffee? What time is it where you're at? And also, what was I just talking about? Oh, shit. College. I'm talking about college. I'm talking about how it's a last-ditch effort to be able to get the conceptual resources necessary to be able to make sense of your life. That's basically what I'm talking about. So, I'd say that going to college was the best thing I ever did. But I also think that if you were raised in a way that made it so that all of the pressures in your life were pushing you in that direction, I could definitely see why you would not want to go. And I could definitely see resisting it. And I could also see being super suspicious about what it is that they teach at universities, or more importantly, how they teach. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how formal education teaches us and why it does it the way that it does it. And mainly to the end, I want to inspire you. Maybe I should have said this at the beginning. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like video production, they always say, you know, you got to tell people what they're going to get out of the thing. It's a little late to do that, but I want to inspire people who are not going to go to college to understand that that doesn't change a fucking thing about whether or not you yourself can be a person who lives an intellectual and creative, fulfilling life. I don't think that going to college will change that. But at the same time, if you've been deprived of the diversity of opinions, perspectives, and personalities, social reference points, and role models that are provided within an educational institution, that's very valuable, and it was something that changed my life for sure. But if you already had that, then I'm not saying it might not really be necessary. The thing is if you want, you know, you can watch these Yale courses on YouTube. There's so many great history and philosophy courses just posted on YouTube. Not just through Yale, but through all of these other universities. Like tons of these top universities have, you know, world renowned professors, you know, doing these lectures, and you can watch them for free. Like that is something special. But that's only a 1/5 of the pie in terms of the experience afforded by being able to study in actual courses like that. And I don't think that online learning is there yet in terms of being able to replace that experience. And part of the reason is being able to just having your horizon of possibilities open and being able to intervene in the lecture and raise a question for a point of clarification. That in and of itself makes or breaks the difference for me. I would say that I take a professor a lot more seriously. I'm able to listen to them more seriously if I'm able to interject, if I have questions. Now, you can get good at asking questions in the comments and other people can help, and so there are workarounds. But the possibility of being able to win the attention of that professor, being able to ask critical questions of that professor, being able to potentially go to that professor's office hours or out to coffee and like really get like, you know, it's like you're getting a sort of like, let's say, an introduction to something. And a lot of people kind of they get a lot of what's going on. You have specific interests for why you care about the given topic. And so being able to have that one-on-one time is invaluable. I absolutely think it's like one of the best things. But higher education is a hostage crisis. That's my biggest concern. It is a hostage crisis because there's a type of person, they're very much like a cat. They want to be respected and have distance and be able to spend time reflecting on things and working through problems and being able to research. And they want to be appreciated for that research by, you know, if, for instance, they teach it, then there will be people who want to hear what they have to say, who are there taking notes because they're like, wow, I'm finding this super informative. That type of person tends to get called an intellectual or a teacher or whatever. And there's a sort of pejorative tinge to the word intellectual because there's a way that people can be intellectuals that is grotesque and eye-rolling, but at the same time, I'm just talking about being a reflective, kind of deeper thinker who isn't satisfied with the way things are shown to us, who always wants to go deeper into whatever it is that person's interests might be. That is the thinker. And that the thinker has been bifurcated, which is to say separated in a binary, from the doer. So there's the division between the doer and the thinker. It's sort of a cultural construction. You probably could find in any society a sort of an analogous situation where you have, people who are doers and people who are thinkers. But the institutionalization of that separation has led to a lot of problems. And so where I hope to go with this sort of narrative or argument or whatever you want to call it is to say that I do think that the division of labor between thinking and doing is coming to its end. I think that the problems with this hostage crisis and the sort of mental asylum that is called the university today, where they have sort of caged all of our thinkers and made it so that they're not even able to think because they keep them preoccupied with busy work and overtasked with large classes and too many classes and low pay and precarious employment. That situation is leading to a lot of people who would otherwise remain kind of dissatisfied house cats of the university, moving off and going and doing their own things. Okay, the lack of freedom, and I don't just mean freedom of speech, which is a problem, left and right, relative to the American scene. That is always an issue on any campus, depending on whether it's more liberal or conservative of a campus. It's always still going to be a problem in some way. But the suppression of speech is, one thing. But the freedom of what you can focus on, the freedom of what you can put your time and your energy towards in terms of research questions that you find most interesting, that has been radically constrained by the motive, the profit motive that has infiltrated and then dominated this institution we call higher education. Now, higher education is a very outdated way of getting some kind of accreditation or legitimation narrative for being higher in the hierarchy in society than other people, right? Like, oh, I'm a professor, so and you've been through my tough class, so now you understand the world better, and now you'll be a better manager in the professional world, and that legitimizes your you being above these mere workers, being a manager for your capitalist bosses, and the oligarchical system that they uphold. That is the sort of situation. I want to use a quote from an essay that I think is useful here. I just pulled it up on the screen. I think you should be able to see it. I will make this larger so that you're able to see it. So let's go ahead. So this is from a critical pedagogy piece that I was reading in preparation for this. I'm going to go ahead. So this is page 19. I'm going to go to the top so you can see the title. Democracy's Nemesis, The Rise of the Corporate University by Henry A. Gurrow. I think that's how you say his name. I'm sure it's something like that. So let's go down to 19. And I would link this in the description, but I think you just have to go find it on some site like Library Genesis, unless you have a legitimate way of getting a hold of it. Was that? Yeah, I was on page 19, right? Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk about the increasing influence of corporate power on higher education. Let's see. So when I was talking about, a professor being replaced by 3 adjuncts, that whole dynamic, we're also talking about everything going online. You know how COVID has been an excuse for some people? Like in my personal dealings with people who didn't like to go out of their houses anyway, they've really made lockdown into sort of like they're righteous. And it's like, no, you don't like to leave your house anyway, and now you're righteous for not leaving your house. I don't think it works that way. A lot of people have to leave their house. So I've just in my own job, I've run into people who are very rude, because, they don't want to have to interact with other people in society. And so COVID has given them a sort of excuse. Well, in the same way, COVID has given the ever increasingly neoliberal approach to education and trying to make everything get automated and go online so that we can displace, the professors who are supposed to be, the main attraction at the university, so we can replace them with, these automated courses. That's happening a lot. And so that's what we're coming into this essay right at the point where he's talking about the onlinelearning.net and how the UCLA courses are all going that way and all this stuff. So it's the fact that he's focusing on University of California, the whole chain of UCs over there, which are some of the best schools in the country, supposedly, is really useful. Because me, with my background, I went to Boise State. And if I'm telling you about Boise State, it's like, okay, that's like the shitty DMV version of a college, right? Like, it's not like compared to Harvard or Yale or UC Berkeley. It's like the special school for kids who got held back, right? Like, yes, you have professors who graduated from Princeton with, a fantastic, CV or resume. Like, they have like all of the check marks, like all the way down. Like, hey, they were an A earning student and they taught all these classes at Yale, and now they're hired at Boise State. The only problem is that they don't know how to communicate with other people or something like that, right? Like, so in a sort of way, like, a state university is often a kind of mixture. Like, you definitely have diamonds in the rough. You have some really fantastic professors and stuff. But in general, I would distrust me if everything I was telling you was only from the experience and standpoint of a person who went to a state university. That's not enough to judge all of higher learning. And obviously, there are going to be exceptions to the general rule and tendency of what I'm talking about with these universities. But the fact that what I'm about to show you is about the University of California institutions of higher education, that will, I think, be revealing. Now, really quick, though, before we get into UC, I just want to give you so Boise State, let me give you a little background on them. So can you see this? Can everyone see this on screen? Taco Bell Arena. So the Boise State is known for its football, and it has a blue football field. People call it the Smurf turf, and it's people are like, "Go Broncos" all the time, right? And so people like my partner Anne, studying neoliberalism and the neoliberalization of the university. Kind of her first set of questions, research questions with this research team that she was on, had to do with how neoliberalization, which is to say turning the university into a business, has become so much about football, right? Because it's the major attraction for funding, but as a result, it radically changes the culture of the whole thing. Like I was saying, there's a certain type of person in society, if they aren't locked up in insane asylums, it's probably because they got pretty good educations, and because of that, these oddballs are allowed to, as long as they can prove that their idiosyncratic infatuations or passion projects could be useful for the children of rich people or aspiring middle class people, then hey, they get a special position at this place that is supposed to be an institution that ultimately is about putting students in front of people who are big geeks or nerds. Well, the problem is that we've gone ahead and packed the same place full of business executives and managers and football players, and we're acting and we have kind of changed the entire motive and purpose of the university towards career advancement and just fundraising for its own sake, right? Which is kind of like, I call it a hostage crisis. It's not just a hostage crisis in the sense that all of society's intellectuals are kind of captured in this institution, meaning that they don't really see a way of doing the things they care about outside of that institution. It's also a hostage crisis in the sense that if we want access to them, we basically have to go into a lot of debt to be able to have those kinds of conversations. And you're not going to really be able to have those kinds of conversations unless you do it. Unless you're my patron, of course. So, but anyway, the Taco Bell arena. Look at that. It's disgusting. Where's my button for that?
Disgusting!
Yeah, we have the Taco Bell arena. You walk around this university and you see corporate fucking brands. It's terrible. Like, look at that the Taco Bell arena. They're so proud. It's like, what are you fucking proud of, you people? This is disgusting. Disgusting. And then the Albertsons Library. Like, no joke. So, right here, actually, if you go to the Board of Education, the Idaho Board of Education, right here, you go down to the bottom, one of these people actually is still working for Albertsons. Yeah, Andrew Scoggin earned his undergraduate degree from Brigham Young University, so he's probably a Mormon, and Juris Doctorate cum laude from Brigham Young's University. So he went to two of BYU, the Mormon schools, institutions. Scoggin has served in leadership roles on both charitable and corporate boards. He joined Albertsons Inc.'s Labor Relations Department in 1993 and currently serves as Executive Vice President of Human Resources, Labor Relations, Public Relations, and Government Affairs for Albertsons Companies. And so for me, who was going through my education, and I already was like, wow, they really run this place like a business and treat students like, customers, and, the professors are all subject to review and critique from students who aren't even trying, who don't even have an inkling of what's going on in the class, and aren't, definitely literally aren't trying at all. The C's get degrees meme is very strong. And so the standards at these institutions have been lowered to kind of accommodate a lot of students who are really just trying to rush through school so they can get on to their next thing. And, parents are like, I'm paying good money for this. And so they're sending letters. And if a professor gives a student a bad grade because they literally just didn't show up to class for half a semester and didn't do any of their assignments, they're subject to bad reviews. And so then they end up letting a lot of people slide by. And so there's a lot of that going on, and it's really pathetic. Well, I was already noticing it, issues like that. That was just one example. I was already noticing issues while going through school. And then it was at my graduation ceremony, when they roll out the military and they they do their whole marching with guns, and they have their whole flag thing, and it's all very oh wow, yes, we can see here where the repressive and ideological state apparatuses really come into they're both right there working together, just in the most explicit way. No separation between higher education and politics, the state. I'm watching this pure ideology, unfold. And
it's pure ideology.
Then the, president of the university gives this whole introduction to this guy who's on the Idaho Board of Education, talking about how this guy has been such a strong advocate for higher education and learning in general, and how he's done so much good to help so many people get good jobs. And this guy has spent his whole life working for Micron, and he was I think he's one of the corporate, top dogs at Micron, which is this software firm, I believe. They might do hardware too. I don't really know what Micron does, but it's computer related stuff. And I think it's a lot of hardware, actually. They do microchips and processors and stuff like that. So the president of the school gives this whole introduction, and then that guy from the Board of Education comes and rambles on and on for 5 minutes. It's incoherent. I taught public speaking at the university. I taught critical thinking at the university as an adjunct. So obviously I wasn't super experienced when I was teaching those things, but I can tell you for fucking sure that this asshat had neither of those skills. He should not have been up there talking. And it was just a real mask off moment. It was like, why is this guy talking for 5 fucking minutes? Talking way longer than the student representatives who were talking at the ceremony. Talking way longer than I think the president himself. Well, it's because he has his name on things. Micron, in the same way that I was just showing you how the Albertsons library. It says Albertsons right there on the fucking library, or it says Taco Bell right there on the arena. It also says Micron on all of these buildings, and it says Simplot on all these other buildings. Simplot, and they don't do microprocessors and stuff like that, like Micron. No, Simplot is like if you've had potatoes, if you've had French fries from McDonald's, then you've had Simplot French fries. Insofar as Idaho is known for its potatoes, which it is. It's literally just because the Simplot family, they have a monopoly on potato production. If you could drive through all of Idaho, and I have like 20 fucking times, and you'll never see any potato fields. Like, it's funny. You drive through all of Idaho, no potatoes. If you're in southern Idaho, it's like you're in North Dakota or Montana. If you're in North Idaho, it's like you're in Alaska. And especially when you're in North Idaho, it's just like beautiful trees and lakes and mountains. No potatoes anywhere. Yet we have potatoes on all of our license plates, and everybody's like, oh, Idaho, potatoes. Well, yeah, somewhere in this state, I suppose, there's a billionaire who has a whole, French fry contract with McDonald's, and so people in China and Germany and on the East Coast are all eating, people in China and Germany and on the East Coast are all eating, people in China and Germany and on the East Coast are all eating, I think it's working now because it's showing me watching that. Okay, so we're back. Sorry, folks. That's fun. So my one of my roommates unplugged the router to restart it, and he did not know I was streaming out here. Sure beats what has happened in the past where someone just unplugged my extension cord out here. So this is my tiny house, and it's very tiny, and I have a 300-foot Ethernet cable running from the house out to here. I'm on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and the internet's already spotty because of that Ethernet cable, and I keep lowering my minimum settings and experimenting to try to make it less laggy. So at least it seems like the audio is less laggy, but the video is still laggy, so sorry about that, folks. But yeah, being fully disconnected just now, that was the roommate. So apparently my roommate was like, yeah, Netflix was being laggy, so I had to restart it. It's like, Netflix is being laggy because I'm streaming. Okay, so living in the middle of nowhere, it's fun. It's fun stuff. Okay, let's get back to this. What were we talking about? It doesn't matter. We're talking about the McDonaldization of everything. All right, let's get back to corporate interests at UC Berkeley.
Corporate interests are also exerting their influence over major aspects of university decision-making in and out of the classroom in a number of other ways. No longer content to make their presence felt on college campuses through the
funding of endowed chairs,
academic centers, or research about business issues that eventually is used as case studies. Companies such as BMW and IBM are taking their involvement with higher education to a new level. When the German automaker BMW contributed $10 million to Clemson University in 2002 to help develop $1.5 billion automotive and research center, Clemson gave BMW...
All right, because there's all these numbers and I can read anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and read that little bit, and I'll probably let the robot reader come back on for some other parts. I was talking about, when I got cut off, I was talking about, I'm sorry if this is, if you find listening to robot voices, difficult. And I was talking about how, developing an immunity to that is a sort of liberating thing if you can get over it. It makes it so that anything that you might be thinking about while you're working is something that you can listen to more stuff about, whether it's a Wikipedia page or a Stanford Encyclopedia philosophy page or articles. You listen to podcasts, whatever it might be. We can always feed ourselves with what we're curious in at the time. And, obviously, so much of the education system is, based on this old industrial banking or factory model of education. Paulo Freire talks about it as the banking model. Ivan Illich talks about it as the factory model. The point is that you're treated, you're really just being prepared to be someone who can take orders, who can reproduce certain actions, who can come to certain conclusions, and you're being taught to be a critical thinker in certain ways, but not other ways, and all of the issues that come along with that, blah, blah, blah. All I'm saying is that a lot of that being forced to be... a lot of the hidden syllabus, as John, God, what's his name? What is this guy's name? Hold on, let me go back to it. I always forget. It's Gatto, John something Gatto. Anyway, this, here he is, John Taylor Gatto. He talks about the invisible syllabus. That's something he talks about a lot. So he says, what's gotten in the way of education in the United States is a theory of social engineering that says there is one right way to proceed with growing up. So that's what a lot of these kind of critical pedagogy people were talking about back then. But he wrote this book on the hidden curriculum of compulsory schooling. And the hidden curriculum of compulsory schooling is basically that you are forced to be interested or to make yourself interested, to muster up interest or to psych yourself up to focus on things that you're not immediately interested in. And then you're evaluated on your ability to actually do that. And that makes you a better employee because, and it's the fact is every person that you're studying, whether it's Michel Foucault or Ivan Illich or Plato, studied what they found interesting. And they worked with other people on the things that they found interesting. That's not to say that they never had to do things that they didn't want to do. Of course they did. But our modern schooling, the hidden syllabus, is you forcing yourself from period to period to focus on things that you actually aren't immediately interested in. Even if you do find biology interesting, you don't necessarily find it interesting at 2 p.m. every Tuesday. And you're having to force yourself to focus on and mentally prepare yourself for, and then do homework on and follow through with, exams and things, all related to something that is arbitrarily placed on you, okay, from outside. Now, obviously, any society is going to have such impositions, but there are a variety of factors that make this unique to our age. This level of compulsory education and of having to become self-moving, self-motivated, little autodidacts who will be able to tackle and solve problems for bosses, that stuff. So, and mostly just through managing their lower waged workers, because higher education is the accreditation of the professional managerial class for the most part. So, okay, but we're going to go back to what I was talking about. Talking about BMW and IBM taking their involvement with higher education to a next level. So I'm going to just keep reading from there. We'll go back to robots in a little bit. But when the German automaker BMW contributed $10 million to Clemson University in 2002 to help develop a $1.5 billion automotive and research center, Clemson gave BMW an extraordinary amount of control over curriculum and hiring procedures. Not only did BMW play a role in developing the curriculum for the automotive graduate engineering school, but it also drew up profiles of its ideal students, provided a list of professors and specialists to interview, and even had approval rights over the school's architectural look. In addition, BMW gave Clemson's president a BMW X5 to drive. In spite of Clemson's claims that it retains its independence as a public university despite its close ties with BMW, candidates for the endowed chairs were interviewed by BMW executives, and a network council composed of BMW managers meets monthly to advise Clemson on the curriculum. Thomas Kerfis, the first person hired to fill a BMW endowed professorship, has no reservations about the growing corporatization of higher education, stating that this is a different model. It is nice to be able to show that it's not just the name beyond the chair and have real ties to industry.
A lawsuit contesting the contract between BMW and Clemson made public a letter written by a BMW official who stated that BMW is going to drive the entire campus, cited in Browning, 2006, p.
This internet is so bad, I feel like I'm just wasting everybody's time. Like,
C6. At least BMW is honest about its intentions and the role it wants to play in shaping Clemson's relationship with the industry. A more serious example of the growing symbiosis between higher education and the corporate world is apparent in a recent agreement between the oil giant BP, formerly known as British Petroleum, and the University of California at Berkeley, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, which is run by the University of California. Under this agreement, BP would provide more than $500 million over a 10-year period to fund biofuel research, thereby doubling the amount of corporate funding on the Berkeley campus. As part of the largest industry-academia alliance in history, BP will fund the Energy Biosciences Institute, which includes 25 labs divided among its 3 public partners. This plan represents the largest corporate funding package in American university history and has enormous implications for university corporate partnerships in the future. Brenman, 2007. While Robert Biagino, Chancellor of UC Berkeley, has lauded the agreement as our generation's moonshot, UC President Robert Dines was more to the point in proclaiming that it is my belief that we're reinventing the research university in these kinds of governed public-private partnerships, cited in Bergman, 2007, para. 15. The details of the agreement suggest that Dines's statement is quite true. Although the kind of research university actually being reinvented is one that increasingly allows corporate priorities for profit to drive its research agenda. What is disturbing about the deal is that BP will place 50 of its own scientists to Guru Democracy's Nemesis 21. Work along with academics, mentoring graduate students, teaching classes, and attending seminars, thereby giving BP an unwarranted amount of control and influence over the direction of the institute. As Jennifer Washburn, 2007, pointed out, BP will be allowed to provide input in appointing a director and other level positions to be filled by BP employees or appointees, thus ensuring that they play a major role in setting research agendas and controlling purse strings. Para 8.
This isn't some shitty state university we're talking about here. This is UC fucking Berkeley, y'all. This is UC fucking, you know, he says on the previous page, I think he says that this is like a more serious example of the growing symbiosis, which means ways of working together between higher education and the corporate world. Yeah, this is a pretty fucking serious and egregious example. And if you are writing papers for whatever reasons on this topic, that's an example worth citing, because, you know, talking about the Taco Bell logo and the French fry, the prison labor French fry billionaire name being all over buildings on campus, and the software, hardware, you know, developer people having their names on buildings, or having Albertson's name on buildings or on the actual board of education. That's all like, yeah, well, you have a shitty state university. What do you expect? What do you expect? You think you'd have quality university coming from a state, you know, quality education coming from a state university? No, idiot. No, absolutely not. But okay, yeah, you would think though that maybe it would be different with UC Berkeley. No, that's my point. That you take it as one of the most elite, prestigious, and cutting edge research universities, and sort of locus points of the life of the mind in higher education. UC Berkeley, utterly corrupted, and obviously I think everybody already knows this, right? Like the weapons manufacturing that goes on at MIT or whatever. Like, people already hear about these things, but this idea that BP, an oil company, is gets to have like how many 30 or 40 of their scientists working in and with all 50 of its own scientists to work along with academics, mentoring graduate students, teaching classes, attending seminars. Like, just imagine how that changes the culture at the university to have these people whose entire careers are focused on oil, big oil, and working for these people. All of a sudden, like, actually teaching your classes, like choosing who gets to be the chair of what departments. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get back to it now. Where were we?
Moreover, this plan grants BP exclusive license options over UC Berkeley intellectual property rights. Associated Students of the University of California, 2007. Many faculty, students, and other members of the academic community at Berkeley were outraged over the fact that they were excluded from any discussion about the proposed partnership during the university's negotiations with BP. Other critics point out that BP employees do not have to abide by the law of public disclosure and have no obligation to publish their research. The closed-door nature of the research that will be conducted under this agreement, along with the BP's overriding profit incentive, raises serious questions about the corporate priorities that will surely dominate this partnership, as well as about what exactly it will mean for universities to act in the public interest rather than in the interest of BP. Other critics have raised an equally disturbing criticism, insisting that the partnership would let BP greenwash its image and poison the well of UC's academic integrity. Marshall, 2007, para. 2. This is a particularly stinging observation in light of BP's public record. Most recently, BP has agreed to pay $373 million in fines and restitution, and has admitted to criminal wrongdoing in order to settle accusations of environmental violations that had led to a fatal explosion at a Texas refinery in 2005 and to leaks of crude oil foreign pipelines in Alaska. Wertigier and Labaton, 2007, p. B1. But BP is also tainted by an ugly political history, including involvement in the overthrow of the Iranian government in the 1950s, support for the South African government during the apartheid years, and possibly financing a private army in Colombia that has killed 6 people protecting a pipeline through indigenous lands. Zimmerman, Ludwig. Corporate university partnerships such as the BP project violate the academic integrity of the university and bode poorly for the future of higher education in that they subordinate democratic values to corporate values and undercut the power of faculty and administration to define the meaning and purpose of the university and its relationship to the larger society. Redefined in a corporate environment, the democratic meaning and function of the university is radically weakened, if not jettisoned altogether, along with the academic freedom to safeguard a socially responsible faculty and those pedagogical commitments so crucial to creating critical citizens capable of questioning received truths and constituted powers.
Cool. We're going to cut it off right there. This is, if the level, of the sort of terminology being used by this professional academic is over your head or overwhelming in any way. I was saying earlier, I don't know what might have come through or what didn't come through. I don't really know where I got cut off by that internet getting disconnected thing, so I'll just kind of repeat it. But we are trained to be linear thinkers, to think that we are failing or going to fail the test or whatever if we miss some part of the information that we're getting. And so we are trained to think that way. And so, linear thinking became subject of criticism by a lot of the critical pedagogues or educators of the 60s era. I will talk a little bit about the sort of a critique of that movement, the sort of hyper liberal critique of neoliberalization, misses a sort of, I guess, important conservative critique of the exact same tendencies and forces. And I think that the two can be brought into important conversation here. But for the time being, suffice it to say that a lot of bullshit flies under the heading of nonlinear thinking. But with that, sort of stipulation or disclaimer, we can get back to saying that, linear thinking isn't actually how learning works. Learning is retroversive. And so I had shared an excerpt. It's in the description of the YouTube video. If you're just joining on Twitch, you can always go back and fast forward by using YouTube. I know Twitch doesn't allow you to do that. You can also go to my personal site if you want to do it that way, theoryplebe.com/live. But linear thinking, the idea that you have to have all of your building blocks like follow a certain sequence before you can come to the grand conclusion that provides the magical understanding of the objective state of affairs, is not the case. That is the easiest streamlined way of teaching a lot of people how to follow orders and develop a strong sense of insecurity if they have not, studied the guidelines and procedures in an institution where you are trying to work in the future. But learning itself is retroversive in the sense that, think about how there's so many words that you never looked up in a dictionary that you basically got what those words meant in context. And over time, those words presented themselves to you in situations you thought, I want to use that word in this situation. I think that would be okay. Sometimes you used it, sometimes you didn't. You looked it up, maybe you didn't. Sometimes you were accurate in the way that you used that word, sometimes you were not. And you learn over time a lot of your language through those kinds of experiments, applying words that you're like, I think that's what that word means, and I think that it works in this context, and it seems to be descriptive of the experience that I'm trying to describe. So then you use the word. Well, that's sort of retroversive in the sense that you're getting it, but then you're like filling it in later. And I was saying that the first pass on any book, especially, or essay, if it's worth reading, it's worth rereading. And the first reading is just an opportunity to figure out if you think it might be worth reading. And if it might be worth rereading, then when or why would it be worth rereading? That should be, I think that should be taught to anybody who wants to start cultivating their mind and doing research into anything. So let's just say that you wanted to read, a book of philosophy. And a lot of that book is over your head. So this is ready to hand, so I'll just wave it around. Michel Foucault, Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison. Okay, so let's just say that half of this is over your head, or 2/3 or 3/5 is over your head. Well, it's fine. That will still, if you read it the first time and you're just getting a general sense for what he's saying, sure, you might not be able to very confidently say what you think he's saying. Like, you'll be like, I think what he was saying is this: everything's a prison, But when you have a sense later on for, I think, like you're trying to think about something, you're like, I think I remember something from that book that would be useful here. Then you can go back, find that. And it's ongoing back where all of a sudden some passage that meant nothing to you lights up and connects a bunch of dots, and all of a sudden things are illuminated. So that is the way that retroversive learning occurs. And so one of my excerpts in the YouTube or Twitch description, actually, it's not in the Twitch description, but it is in the YouTube description, is to a video that I put up. It's a Robot Red excerpt about retroversion, which is a word coined by Molly Ann Rothenberg, who wrote this book called The Excessive Subject. Yeah, it's right there, so I had to look over at it. It has a foreword by Slavoj Žižek, the man, the myth, the legend himself.
It's pure ideology.
And he thinks that this concept, retroversion, is actually super important, and that she's right in her claim that this list of thinkers that includes Žižek, but also like people like Lacan or Badiou or Deleuze-Guattari or all of these other, post-structuralist or French, sociologists were getting at. They were all getting at retroversion in their own ways. They just weren't using that word to talk about it. And so she's kind of like bringing them all together into dialogue, talking about retroversion. Anyway, retroversion. Point being, if you don't get it on the first pass, learning is nonlinear. Don't worry about it. You'll always come back to it. But I hope I whetted your appetite for the critique of the critical pedagogy, that 1960s sort of new left, ultra liberal critique of neoliberalization. Now, when I say ultra liberal critique of neoliberalization, that's like what are you talking about? Ultra liberal aren't neoliberals themselves ultra liberal? I'm using ultra liberal in this sense to say psychological liberal, which is not the same as classical liberal. We're not talking about the liberalism of John Locke, Adam Smith, those bourgeois revolutionaries. No, we're not talking about them. We're talking about the very gendered psychological predisposition, that sort of, oh, I'm liberal because I am compassionate, empathetic. I care about, openness to new experience and curiosity and nurture and, so those are all coded feminine, and that's all fine and dandy, but there is this, just because something gets coded that way doesn't mean obviously that it should be restricted to only women, or that people like men are going to be cucks because they exhibit those characteristics. But I do think that no matter how gender codifies things in a society, that traits like nurture and caring about fairness and compassion and empathy and all of these things are important, and they're important in every individual. But that it's sort of a tragedy that the culture war has sort of made it seem like one side of the proverbial aisle gets to monopolize those traits, and that the other side is the one that's going to focus on things like security and strength. And obviously, like, a good balance between mommy and daddy, if we're going to go with that analogy, a good conversation, a good like both sides, no matter how it gets coded, should be practicing being more balanced, in the sense that, like, understanding that the reality principle and the actual constraints of necessity and of actual, like, threats to security, and the actual requirements of legitimate authority and force, or of strength in various circumstances, those are all, like, valid concerns, and that predispositions towards those traits are not inherently bad. But since the 1960s, there has been this unnecessarily dichotomized bifurcation, which just means a split. That's all, just a fancy way of saying split between those two modes. And so when I say ultra liberal critique of neoliberalization, I'm saying it's not fair, and it's not, like, really listening to what the students want, and it's not really helping those students, like, find themselves and explore their ultimate possibilities and be creative, and it's just treating them like customers instead of, like, up and coming adults. And it's a very, like, mommy sort of critique of neoliberalization, and that's fine because it's all true. But the conservative critique has been one of, because there's like this sort of liberal hegemony in the universities, that critique has been a critique of conformity. And so John Gatto, is that what his name was? John Taylor Gatto, dumbing us down, the hidden curriculum of compulsory schooling here. This is a guy who is definitely a conservative, and so his critique of higher education and the general, like, styles of schooling, and he's not conservative in, like, the new sense, like a complete piece of shit. He's just, he's writing from a time when that meant something different, I think. But he's more conservative minded, and he's definitely he's got a huge problem with conformity. Obviously, Bell Hooks is like a more radical version of the same sort of critique. She thinks that the purpose of higher education is to teach students to transgress. But the way that these critiques of the banking and factory models of education from ultra-liberal people tend to go, and it's a huge red flag for me, is it buys into excuses for lowering standards. And professors will think that they're being radical because they come to class unprepared to actually teach what it is that they've spent their whole life studying. And they instead think that they're radical because they're flipping the classroom, putting students on the spot, and basically getting students to teach the class instead of them. They think that that's the conversational model. They think that they're trying to make the students see themselves as educators and, actual adults who will be responsible for their own education. But like I said, it does become an excuse because when you have professors, I saw a lot of these people firsthand who are so strapped for time. All of their research is directed towards their career advancement. They're not able to be researching the things they find immediately interesting. And they are in more bureaucratic sort of councils, committees, and boards than they are in actual classrooms. And then they spend a lot of their time grading or what have you, or managing the people who are. Guess what gets sidelined though when you're that split up between busy work and bureaucratic acrobatics? What gets sacrificed is coming to class prepared, and coming to class prepared to unpack the stuff that students are struggling with. And if students are being told that they need to read something, and then they read that thing, and they struggled with that thing, and then they came to class and they were so overwhelmed by how difficult what they read was that they don't even know where to begin asking questions. Retroversively, they're going to get the most from hearing the professor elaborate on what they had been reading in a variety of ways from a bunch of different standpoints, and also responding to critical questions raised by students who had actively engaged with that text. But what you have is, even if a student finds the time to be able to do the reading, which will be surprising, they come to class and then the professor wasn't actually prepared to really talk about it. And then that professor ends up just like, they're not really a good facilitator at discussions either. So they're kind of like just talking about whatever they find interesting, but it has nothing to do with the reading. And that conversation is kind of being guided by people who didn't do the reading, who are just kind of, they know that there's some kind of grade in participation, so they engage, so you are suddenly like, well, I'm so busy on my other classes, this class no longer makes sense. I'm not going, I don't have to read for this class. Nobody else is. So you stop really preparing. And so that is something that you see a lot. It's not just in shitty state universities. I've talked to enough people who went or are going still to prestigious higher education institutions, and the graduate experience when you get into the higher stages of education, it's really no different. In fact, it might be very much worse. Really what you learn to do is to gut texts, and gutting texts is where you read, the first, you read about the thing you got to read. You read the little about section, then you read the first paragraph, and then you read the last paragraph, and then you flip through and you find the parts that are italicized and you read those, and then you try to figure out where you need to hone in on, and then you maybe reread the last paragraph, and then you're like, okay, I've got a good enough sense for it, and now you've read the book. What?
Disgusting!
Yeah, that's
Amazing.
It's no, it's not gonna fly. It's not going to fly because people who are troubled by the complexity of the world, who have a lot of things on their plate that they need to be studying, who find themselves in an institution like that where those sort of practices are normalized and becoming the sort of prevailing tendencies or norms, are going to eventually either flee the university, stop going to universities altogether, or have to find a way to balance satisfying these professors who aren't even coming prepared anymore at the exact same, and these wannabe radical professors, they think they're themselves radical even though they're not coming prepared, because I'm flipping the classroom, I'm putting it on the students, haha, wow. Yeah, finding ways to satisfy them while still finding ways to eke out the time and energy to be able to satisfy your own interests, cravings, research, drive. So that is what ends up happening, and you realize in the process of doing it that sometimes maybe you're better off not even being at that university, but at the same time, like, the connections that you make there while you're there, those are irreplaceable, and I don't want to diminish that. And I do want to say that a lot of the professors, though they might play into these things, you're still going to find that diamond in the rough who is likely to make a tremendous impact on you and change your life. So yeah, the whole thing is like, critique it, sure, but the critics of it miss something important, and you can't just disregard it wholesale. You've got to keep in mind that the university still, still got its useful aspects. Is it worth salvaging, or is it capable of being salvaged, or how will it be salvaged? We started out this whole stream. I talked way earlier about the addition of labor as opposed to the division of labor, and how one person is now expected to do 5 different areas of expertise, that 5 people would have been doing back in the 90s. And that's made possible by software that automates various aspects of the process, which makes it so that the learning curves to, become a graphic designer or what have you, are made more accessible to more people. And so the market becomes more competitive. And so you're expected to no longer just be a graphic designer, but to also be a marketing consultant and social media poster and video producer and all of these things at once, which those are all different careers if you went back 50 years, So now that's all just one person. I think that you and me, normal people, we're being forced to kind of do that, and that what's happening to people that are ensnared within this hostage crisis called the university, the professors, are as they get displaced by or get kind of you find yourself still working there. Fewer and fewer professors are being held onto or hired back as other people retire, and then all of a sudden you find yourself having more and more of these meetings. What's coming is an approach to higher education, though, that is going to revolve around what they call lifelong learning, which would be good if that actually meant what I think we do. But instead, what it actually means is a sort of, hey, you've got to make yourself versatile and flexible for capital, meaning that, the job market is super precarious, meaning that you're not going to have a career at one place where you can just clock a 9 to 5 and then retire. No, in fact, you should be planning on never retiring, and you should plan on never being at any career place for more than 3 years. And you should be planning on certain fields that you're working in being automated out of existence, and therefore gaining the technical expertise to be able to manage those automated processes, or you're going to have to go back for what they're calling lifelong learning, so that you can move into some other field and just basically follow the dictates of capital. And I talked to the former president of Boise State University in a one-on-one meeting, where he laid out his vision of what he sees the urban research institution of the future being. And he said that he expects that it's going to be like you pay a subscription. So, right now it's like your tuition ends up being sort of a lifelong subscription anyway, because you're paying debt, right? I am. So you're paying for this sort of subscription that gives you access to a certain amount of classes in a given year, and that it comes with a sort of warranty that promises that if your career that you're going into gets replaced or made irrelevant in the future, that because you are an alumni at that institution, you will be able to go back and continue your learning, and that's covered by those initial costs or by that subscription. So by that debt or by that subscription, whichever it would be. That's the way that he was seeing the future of. And this is just some normie businessman who was the president of the university, and he just sees it as like the necessary direction that we're headed in. And I think that you and me, we have to figure out our own ways of coping within those changing conditions. Whether or not higher education makes sense for us is always going to boil down to you and your particular situation. If you have questions, comments, or concerns related to any and all of this, I know that we've run the gamut. We've talked about a lot of things here. But even if you just have questions about, like, navigating higher education, do feel free to reach out to me or speak up in my Discord community. It's not much of a community. It's basically just where I tell people stuff's going live. I will share a link to that in the chats before I get off here. But do shoot me an email. That's the best way to get a real response from me. In the near future, I hope to only use a P.O. box to communicate with a lot of people, because I want to focus on reading and writing and working and not being online and not distracted by notifications. And if people really want to talk, they can write a letter. But we're not there yet. And for now, email is definitely the best way to get a serious response from me, though sometimes I have to think about it for months before I respond. But I am thinking about it. Point being, if you have questions, comments, or concerns regarding all of this, you can just speak up in the comments on the Discord, or shoot me an email at theoryplebe@gmail.com, because I know it's been a lot. We've been over a lot of stuff here. So let's just run through my bullet points really quick. Someone had said, like, can I get the text version of this? So what did I say here? So the situation as it stands, I never ended up actually reading like what most of this says, but the situation as it stands from Boise State University to UC Berkeley, Micron to BP, is administrative busywork and bureaucratic acrobatics are the norm now. Radical pedagogy has been retooled as interactive learning, which is a fancy way for replacing real professors with nannies and grooming students to become flexible for the new corporate scene. And then I did read this other part earlier where I said, I'm not anti-school though. There's something useful, blah, 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 in all of it. But yeah, I've been a student, an administrative assistant, student government representative on faculty boards, president of a variety of clubs. I taught for 3 years at BSU. And then I even worked for professors and administrative assistants by doing their yard work or construction. I leave out here that I also was a paid event organizer for student government, and that I was also not all of this is at the same time. This is all kind of spread out over the course of some time. But I was also a research intern that led a group on a research project. So that, I've been up to my elbows for years doing all of this stuff after having, spent nearly a decade in the workforce just doing manual labor. And so I've kind of gotten a taste of both worlds. I've lived without conceptual resources to make sense of or understand the world. I've been in the university scene, and I've been in like many of the roles that one can occupy at that scene. Anyway, and then my sort of summary, I think I said the addition of labor or the consolidations of skills culture is the future for the rest of our lives. This is bad and good in the sense that knowledge of it prepares you for what is to come, which makes you more competitive. It is also good in the sense that humans are empowered by stacking skills. However, we are nevertheless precarious as ever, and any one person's comfort seemingly comes at the cost of a rising number of people whose safety only diminishes. Not because people don't have value to contribute, but because the social wealth we invest our energy into is owned and controlled by abstract forms of domination, the tendency of which is to cut us off. Marx called it objectified labor via the means of production that through forms that what we now call automation displace a rising pool of people who are devalued by the market and the society that prioritizes a person's ability to contribute value as the basis of their human dignity. That is a sort of situation we find ourselves in, yes. And we've moved through critical I don't think I explained what pedagogy is. I might have said that it just means education, like how we teach stuff. I did say that at the beginning, yeah. And we talked about the hidden syllabus, insight from John Taylor Gatto. We talked about like, oh, I'm so radical because I come unprepared for class. I read bell hooks, teaching to transgress. So now I come to class and I tell students not to do their homework. Yay. Yeah, that's obviously...
It's pure ideology.
And why is it pure ideology? Well, because you're making a virtue out of necessity. Just because you can't do your homework and come prepared, you make a virtue out of that. Oh, I'm so transgressive. Oh yeah? No, I think you're just busy and you're trying to elevate yourself. My own background with alternative education, blah, blah, blah. I talked about homeschool versus, and how sometimes it's a lot more like no school. There's pros and cons to the different ways that people in traditional or super hippie sorts of homeschooling environments might, like either hyper religious or super hippie. That's kind of the two kinds of homeschooling environment. There's kinds of pros and cons that come with both of those. And it really, a lot of how that educational experience or lack thereof turns out for you is probably going to have a lot to do with your parents' class standing, economically speaking, because obviously a single parent or two parents without a network of other educators who know what the fuck they're talking about are not able themselves to communicate to you what is of value or how these other fields of consciousness function in methodology or discipline. Like they can't introduce you to those things. They can only kind of like say, well, here's a textbook and it says this, so now you got to do that. Okay, well, it says this, now you got to do that. Well, it says this, well, now you got to do that. And so you study, biology and you study math and you study, a little bit of history or whatever, and then you get out of school and you know the answers to some of those questions, but it feels more like a trivia game instead of like you having a sort of systematic, comprehensive understanding of how those fields of consciousness were established in the first place, are maintained by methodological practices, or some broader form of discipline that has allowed us to pioneer that region of knowledge. You don't have that if you just got pushed through the grinder to be a good employee, which is what most of this invisible syllabus turns out to be, right? So the hidden syllabus of unreinforced structured learning, the hidden syllabus of unstructured learning. I'm not going to get too much into that. We've talked enough about the hidden syllabus of structured learning. So let's go ahead and talk about the hidden syllabus. Remember, by the way, when you hear hidden syllabus of structured learning or the banking or the factory model, really it's about taking orders. You're being taught how to take orders and maintain some like business hierarchy and its goals that are profit driven instead of people driven or whatever. You're being taught how to be a professional manager or you're being taught how to be a lowly worker. Either way, that's basically your only two opportunities if you're in an average school. But the hidden syllabus for unstructured learning, what's that? What would you say is the hidden syllabus of unstructured learning? I think that the people who were writing in the 60s and 70s, these radical critiques of education that I like to read, like Ivan Illich and Paulo Freire and bell hooks, I think that one of the things that they've not thought deeply enough about is that there's not a magic cure-all to just taking a person out of school. Like, you can't, I think it would be foolish to make some statement or bet on, oh, people are just better off not in a school. Oh yeah? Well, what are the alternatives and how are they being socialized? And what are their social reference points and role models that aren't just their parents? And who are the other people who are passionate about other things that aren't just the things that those parents are passionate about? And what kind of diversity and perspective or ideology is present in that social experience of that child being brought into society, and can they even be properly said to be a citizen or in the society if they've been inculcated into it in a way that did not adequately prepare them with the conceptual resources to be able to make sense of either the world or just the way other people are operating. And the way people operate is not some explicit thing that we know consciously only. It's also something that you gain a sense for over time through continued sort of experiments. Every time you go to school and everything you do, it turns out like at a subconscious level, you're figuring out how to be around other people. And that's something that a lot of people who are homeschooled or deschooled or unlearned or whatever you might want to call it, end up being deprived from. Not saying, though, that people at super underfunded public schools are necessarily going to have much better of an experience of socialization. In a lot of cases, their socialization experience is really just preparation for prison. It's not just the workplace, but it's prison. Depressive hedonia is the mood that takes precedence or takes over and pervades the university, where you, instead of having people who are disciplined and doing it the old factory style of education, instead they are supposed to be self-driven, self-motivating, flexible, preparing themselves for a post-industrial corporate workspace where you are to be constantly making yourself useful to the company, and but at the same time you don't actually see any future in it, and you don't see any future for society or the planet, and so you just feel a sense of despair, because even if you have interests in philosophy or science, you're not able to actually study those things, because your horizon of possibilities and your ability to repeatedly invest time and energy into sustained effort that would be able to cultivate your soul, so to speak, or your comprehensive capabilities to be able to kind of build off of what you're learning in those classes. That's all foreclosed by a future where you've got to force yourself to be interested in stupid bullshit jobs. The future of learning. Okay, we're about to close out here, so get in the chat. I will turn to chat here in a second. I'll read the chat, I promise. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the future of learning. Go ahead and really quick, if you want, when I read the chat, to me to read off anything about your own personal experiences. You could talk about your own. You could talk about how bad it is at your university or your school when you were growing up. You can talk about. You can give me, you could elaborate off of anything I said, or you could raise questions about anything that I said. Make sure to get that into the chat before I read the chat, because otherwise I won't see it and it will be too late, and then it won't be in this video. And then people who are coming back and watching this later, or re-watching this, a lot of you will re-watch this, because if you're just getting a sense for if this is worth watching or not, you'll want to go back, because there's a lot of stuff that I said earlier on and you probably didn't catch that, because the average viewing time of a 2-hour video like this is usually just like a half hour. I look at the analytics, and so usually a person only pops in and watches it for a half hour. Well, if you're finding this useful, you'll probably want to go back and rewatch the whole thing later. So people, make sure to get your questions or comments in there, because they'll be a part of that experience for people who are coming back later after the fact. It might be even you. You might even forget that you watched this, and then you're watching it 3 years from now, and then you're like, oh shit, I actually asked a question and Theory Plebe literally read it on stream and talked about it, and I totally spaced that I had even seen this before. And that does happen, and it's hilarious. But anyway, the future of learning. So I say we are on the forefront of a new mode. I'm all about new modes. I'm very excited about the possibility of new modes, because suffice it to say, I am pretty disillusioned with the current options. So anyway, pioneers at the intersection between life of the mind and practical work. That's us. That's you and me. That's what we're doing. We have to work, and we get to do practical work. And if you're one of those trust fund babies who's living the true depressive hedonia life, and you've not really had to work in your life, or maybe you have, but that's just so that you can get your allowance, or so you don't get kicked out of school or whatever. Our sympathies, and you're still a part of this, and we need a sort of unified effort between people who are depressed and rich, but whose parents are super alienated from them because of that pursuit of profit, and people who have to work every fucking day of their lives. There does have to be a sort of unity there, because otherwise we're never going to be able to get anything done. But also because this thing called capital is killing us all. Okay, we're all alienated and in different ways. So However your sick, sad, pathetic life is going, whichever way it might be, I hope that you're finding some meaning in this. I hope that you're finding ways of coping. I hope that you find opportunities in the midst of the obstacles thrown before you on your journey towards actualizing your highest potential and making yourself a commodity on the market of value. Anyway, so listening and acceleration versus slow reading. So recently, a friend of mine did this Facebook post. I think I screenshotted it. And he was talking about slow reading and the importance of slow reading. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and read it really quick because I am such a listener. I listen to like 2 or 3 books a day. I don't finish them. There's not that many minutes in a day, even though I do, sometimes really speed up the things that I'm listening to. My point is that, I listen to a lot of things, and so at work, I'm constantly listening to books if I can. If I'm walking between the bathroom and work, I'm like listening to something with my ear pod, right? Well, I also am an advocate for slow learning, and I'm an advocate for really sitting and working through a text. And if you only read 1 book in the year but you get a lot out of it, and you pour yourself into it, and you reread it, and you go back to parts that you missed, and you go over them again, and you take notes, and you go over your notes, and then you go back and then you read more of it. That's fucking awesome. And I've done that. And I don't know that my reading comprehension level would have gotten high enough that my listening comprehension level could have caught up and then exceeded that if it hadn't been for the fact that I've done both. And I think that a lot of people are going to have to do both. But I just wanted to read what my dear friend Bert said. He said, God, can I get this on screen? I want to get this on screen because I respect you all, and I understand a lot of people can't actually follow along when I just read something. So I will actually show that. Let me share this image. Let's share the image on. I'll pull it up, and then I'll check the chat here in a second. But we're gonna read this as a part of our, in a sort of way, everything has been building up this whole stream to my vision of the future, which is not. I mean, as critical as this discussion has been, I always think that we should be critical towards a productive sort of opportunistic end. And opportunistic in the good sense, not in the bad sense. There's a lot of reasons that there's a bad sense to the word opportunistic, but I mean in the sense of like we're critical so that we can find the contradictions and crises inherent to the things that are presupposed as being reality that aren't necessarily actually going to remain that way. Things are changing, and preparing ourselves for those changes, good and bad, taking preemptive measures to cope with and deal with those bad things that will unfold, and at the same time investing ourselves in and preparing ourselves for and experimenting with the good, the possible good, the chance occurrences along the way. So, all right, now I'm going to go ahead and pull this screenshot of what Bert said. I'm going to pull it up on screen here. Gosh, my internet is so slow. I'm not even sure if anyone's watching still. Folks, are you still there? Let me peek back in on the chat here. Oh, bye, ATS. See that you left. Later. Precarious jobs, you got to go to yours. Yes, you do. Or you'll be homeless again. All right. So let's see. Bert, slow reading. I have to save the file, and then I have to pull it over and drop it on the... And actually... Yeah. Okay, so let's pull it up. Okay, we've got it on screen, folks. He says, "It has taken me a long time to realize that while I am reading something very difficult, I'm doing 3 things simultaneously. I note what I discern or merely feel to be the general drift or intention of what I'm reading." So that's what I was calling getting oriented with what we're going over, like getting a feel for what you're going over. That's what he's talking about. 2, while making sense of how this is being specifically accomplished. So you are not just seeing, okay, so this author says things that I like or don't like, or they're filling me in on things that I'm curious about or that I might find useful later. That's the first thing. That's good. But more importantly, how are they doing that? Is their methodology for doing that suspect? Do they just kind of ad hoc, post hoc, off the cuff, bullshit their way through their arguments? I actually was kind of taken aback by the fact that that essay I was reading off of earlier, called Democracy's Nemesis, The Rise of the Corporate University by Henry A. Guru from McMaster University, I actually was shocked by how bad he is sometimes at making arguments, how unchecked certain presuppositions go for him, where he will just cite as his evidence the mere fact that John Dewey or Hannah Arendt said something. As they say, the task of higher education is this. Okay, well, can you elaborate on what the alternatives to that are and what they were arguing against and why they were convinced of that and how you've come to the conclusion that you think that they're right? And, could you run by me some counterfactuals as to other ways that it might be? Nope, none of that. All he does is cite Hannah Arendt and Dewey said this. Assume it to be true, move on. It's like, Hannah Arendt wasn't so dogmatic. I don't know about John Dewey. I haven't read enough of his work, but that sounds just kind of ridiculous to me. And there's a lot of that kind of sloppy scholarship in academia. I'm not saying Henry A. Guru, or whatever the fuck. I'm not saying, here, actually, that guy right there, it's on the screen right now. I'm not saying that this guy's like a complete imposter or full of shit. I'm just saying that academics have their little cliques and their journals that they write in where there are certain kinds of norms and there's certain ways that they allow each other to get away with not being rigorous in certain regards. And that the way that critical pedagogy has gone in contemporary academia, like the way that they write right now, they say a lot of great things, but sometimes their unchecked presuppositions it's kind of like, it's because they're not in touch with philosophers in their life, so they don't have people who have the critical methodological sort of criteria to be able to sort through and give them a hard time for saying bullshit like that, just letting it go unchecked. But whatever. Anyway, this is all an aside. So I'm sorry. Yeah, that was quite the aside. So anyway, so number one, getting through the thing, getting a sense for it. Number two, how was it accomplished? So like we're using the example of Henry Guru's essay. How does he make his arguments? That's something that you're keeping an eye on as you read slowly. And then the third thing is grasping both. So the what they're doing and how they're doing it, grasping both in relation to their compatibility or incompatibility with my existing field of commitments, and noting how this requires an alteration and inferential development or relinquishment on my behalf of those commitments. And so what does that mean? Well, philosophy challenges your assumptions, your presuppositions, your conceptual frameworks, and can call all of them into question, can focus in on specific ones that you were not realizing that you were assuming or committed to. And so when you read anything that's critical, you are having to check your own assumptions, presuppositions, and commitments. And you're having to think, why do I think what I think? And how does this challenge me to think differently? And so that those are the three things that Bert is saying that he does. Okay, so then I will read on. So he says, for this reason, I'm a slow reader. And sometimes it requires multiple readings to eventually achieve this end. If I do any one of these things on their own, the result is weak and one-sided. In the end, this thoroughness yields great rewards, but it's a slow process. Now that I know what I'm doing, I don't feel so bad about my slow progress. If you think what I just said makes sense, please copy and paste this to your wall, tagging one other person you know as well as me and numbering it with your favorite color. And then he said he's messing with us and he would never do that. So he was just joking. So he's an older gentleman, believe that he's like 65. And so he just retired, and he's been reading a lot of Hegel ever since he and I and some other people read the Phenomenology of Spirit together. He's been just reading Hegel for like the last couple of years. I mean, he does take breaks to read other things, but just, it's quite the way to be retired. He reads at least 20 pages of Hegel every day. And, he's just working through it, like really taking his time because he's retired now. And I think that that's awesome. But not everybody has that possibility. Not everybody can do that. So I mean, we tend to want to make a virtue out of necessity, as I was talking about earlier. We tend to want to be like what our situation forces us to do, we turn that into being like some good thing, and we make that something that is about us. But in reality, look, you're going to have opportunities to take your time tarrying with the text and really understanding it. And you're also going to be in phases of life when you really don't have that capability. Just realize that it's a dialectical sort of process, meaning that those moments in your life where you have time to do the slow reading, and those moments in your life when you don't, and you're really just kind of just covering ground, getting a sense for the stuff that you're doing, or that other people are doing, getting a sense for why they're doing it the way that they're doing it and how they're doing it. Those moments are not removed from one another in time. They are informing one another through what we were calling earlier retroversion. So there is this sort of gradual filling in and expanding that you are doing, and don't feel overwhelmed just because something goes over your head. That's my biggest thing that I want to encourage you to do. And most importantly, always be developing new ways to approach things and experiment, because we are on the forefront of an organic intellectual revolution in this country and the world itself, where workers everywhere are raising their listening comprehension levels by listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, and audiobooks. And that is a unique new opportunity on the stage of history. These old problems of, we want to have a workers' movement, and we're going to have people lead the workers, and those people who lead the workers are going to be people who know stuff, and they're going to be leading people who do stuff. That kind of old division is becoming nullified, or it's losing credibility. That kind of bureaucratic removal is being undermined. I do think that there's a rising number of us, people who are just, we either come from poverty or from the lower tiers of the working class, who through whatever means possible are equipping ourselves with the conceptual tools to be able to navigate this ever complexifying existence. Okay. And happy to have you on board. I'm glad that you're a part of the process as well. Just remember that this is just the beginning. I personally feel like I'm just getting started. I feel like everything I've done with this channel has been merely laying some basic groundwork and experimenting with different methods for communicating with people. And that what is to come over the next 5 years is really exciting. And the last thing I want to lead off with before I look at the comments again is just to say that I was talking to another one of my dear friends, and this person is in a Marxist organization. He's like the chair of the Marxist organization that I am a fellow traveler of. I'm technically a card-carrying member, but I am not quite a traditional Marxist, and so I'm more of a fellow traveler, and I do try to help them in whatever ways I can. But anyway, he was talking about how, considering the fact that people don't read and that education is so undermined, who is our audience when we do stuff like a video like this? Who is our audience? What are we doing when we do this? And he was talking about all the problems with trying to assuming who your audience is and then trying to communicate with that audience. And I told him that my goal, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and my book is going to say this, my goal is that my audience are people who will be 25 in 30 years. Because the people doing what we're doing are just the very tip of the iceberg of what's to come. And it's our responsibilities to help equip the up and coming generations with the tools necessary to accelerate and consolidate their learning of various kinds of skills, whether those are the kinds of skills that are needed just to cope with moving through regular life, or if it's the more theoretical or like sort of language skills. The language versus bike skills distinction is one that I haven't actually talked about in any of my videos. It's in my upcoming book, and we'll get into that later. But the point being, the rapid acceleration and lowering the learning curve obstacles to various fields of consciousness, and being able to equip people with the tools to be able to do these things, not just on their own, but also kind of on their own sometimes, but also with other people within and without institutions. All of that is on us. And the reason I say that they will be 25 and 30 years is because I'm giving myself 5 years to prepare myself to really start speaking to that audience. I have 5 more years where I will read everything and study everything 3 times in preparation to really figure out what of my last 15, because it'll be 15 years of this kind of research by the time that generation is being born. The question will be, what in my 15 years of studying political philosophy and political science and economics and sociology and history and anthropology and philosophy of science and science itself and mathematics, what in those 15 years is this upcoming generation not getting from school in terms of like a way of approaching these things? And how can I aid them in that process? And then who knows? I could have a child and maybe that would be in 5 years, around then. Yeah, I do plan on having a child, and that would probably be in about 5 years. So it'll be basically that child's generation, or those children's generation, that we are, or that at least I am speaking to. And these are going to be people who are, what I'm saying is the organic intellectual revolution in the United States. Now, I focus on the United States because I am in the United States. We're a major world player for the time being. That doesn't really matter. I would focus on this anyway, just because it's what I know. But the fact is also the United States is the most anti-intellectual country on the planet, probably. Like, it's pretty bad. I mean, the only thing worse might have been like Pol Pot's Cambodia, where, oh, you have eyeglasses? You must be an intellectual. We'll kill you, hack you to pieces with machetes. Okay, like, besides, like, that level of anti-intellectualism, like, the U.S. is basically the fucking worst. And you get it on the left and the right. The left will be like, oh, it's pretentious and elitist, and it's all just a big circle jerk, and it's just a perpetuation of patriarchy and capitalism, and higher education is completely pointless, and there's no reason that we should ever have anything be structured ever, and no one should have to learn anything. And then you have the right be like, oh, it's all a bunch of liberal brainwashing, and oh, you used a word that was bigger than fuck, well then we can't understand it. So that's why Trump would talk in baby language. So yeah, it's bad both ways. And that's why I've given up on the majority of people who are currently existing, and I'm focusing on the people who will be 25 and 30 years, and on you and me, like us. This little thing we've got going here, where we're developing ourselves in this way, where we are the synthesis between the life of the mind and the work of the hands. So thank you everybody so much. That's the end of my talk. We did it. Hold on. Do I have sound bites where here? Here we go.
Great success.
All right, so Junaid says, oh yeah, and how could a teacher work to radicalize or move their students to Marxism, socialism, etc.? Wait, hold on. I got to go higher up in the conversation before I get to all of that. So, okay, so people had said goodbye to anarchist tech support who had to go work his precarious job. Junaid says, love the Zizek sound button, so I'll go ahead and push it again just for you.
It's pure ideology.
Scott Murdo says, oh, and Scott's been here this whole time. What's up, Scott? Scott says, David Noble's first book, America by Design, Science, Technology, and the Rise of Corporate Capitalism, is a seminal work on the, on the univ what's the MIC in that sentence? I don't really know, but yeah, okay, that's good to know. I will look it up. America by Design. There's also, for people who said that they're going to be researching this stuff on their own some more, which is very exciting for me, by the way. I just love to hear that people are getting inspired here. Do look up also the thinker Christopher Newfield. Like I said, Anne and other people I know are studying neoliberalism at a research hub on a university. And Christopher Newfield wrote The Great Mistake and The Unmaking of the Public University. And they're both of those books are also seminal works. So Scott Murdo shared America by Design, Science, Technology, and the Rise of Corporate Capitalism. Totally, that's cool. But also, yeah, check out Christopher Newfield's The Unmaking of the... It might be called the Research University, but also it might just be called the University. But just look up Unmaking and you'll see it. But he also wrote a book called The Great Mistake. And so both of those books are kind of on the same topic, which is the neoliberalization of education and how it's kind of ruining our possibilities for really advancing human understanding and knowledge through academics. We should invert that dynamic, says Scott. Capital must become flexible, etc., for the workers. Capital is flexible, but flexible for the workers. Yes. Well, at the point that capital works for the workers, it will not be capital anymore by definition. But you're right. I absolutely see what you're saying. And when I say by definition, I just mean, well, by the definition of the person who wrote the 3 volumes on the topic. Yeah, you're right, though. Insofar as what you mean is the social wealth and the advanced conditions that have been created off of the backs of working people everywhere. Yes, once that is actually working for and under the control of, or at least opening up opportunities for the people who produce that society instead of just the people who own it. Once the owners and producers are one and the same, or at least once our access and opportunities are as though they're one and the same, then it won't really be capitalism anymore. It'll be something else, and it'll either be better or worse, and hopefully it'll be better. Probably not, but we'll see. DDD says, that's so true. Reverse classroom teaching model kills me. I'm like 20 minutes behind. Oh, DDD. You probably caught up by this time. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. People who... I think there's a mixed, I understand some people who are watching this are probably just like, I fucking love the flipped classroom. Yeah, well, you're probably that person who didn't really come prepared. But if you're an exception to what I'm saying and you actually did come prepared and you like that model of education, congratulations, your learning style is valid. But there is definitely still a place in my life for lectures. I think that the fact that lecture has a pejorative kind of tinge to it when people say, oh, you're lecturing me. Yeah, it's like the old version of mansplaining. Both of those come out of the New Left, which has a sort of anti-intellectual, anti-higher learning sort of bent. Like, oh, it's radical to be... We don't have to read, yeah. Which was also obviously led by a generation of people whose parents had gone to college and who themselves had parents paying for their college. And so they kind of just took it all for granted and were like, oh, but working people don't get to do that. We'll be like them. You can't be like them. And the fact is you have internalized so much of the social and cultural capital of those parents who went to college themselves that you have no idea what you're taking for granted because you've internalized it all. So don't just be against the thing that you've benefited from without knowing the distinction between what you've really actually benefited from and what everybody else is subject to, which is gross negligence and deprivation of the concepts necessary for making sense of this world, much less the social connections and networks that come with something like a higher education institution. Anyway, DDD says, this is so true. Professors be like that, mate. You can't even be prepared for that lesson. I'm the type of person that learns after the fact. Yes! Me too. That's what I'm saying. I can't for the life of me learn during the lecture. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you think that you are left behind during the lecture, therefore you need to tune out. No, you're not. You're not realizing the value here. Parvati says, will you be reposting this stream? I really want to rewatch it. Yes, it will be still available on my YouTube. Juniad says, is there any links? And by the way, folks, if you're watching this from Twitch or my personal site, I'm mostly reading YouTube comments right now, but I will check in on the Twitch and my personal comments. But most of it's been YouTube engagement. So, and I do see some people on Twitch like Hegel did nothing wrong, saying, "Yeah, I'm here." Hi, Hegel did nothing wrong. Good name. Plan on becoming a teacher. Any advice? Will COVID-19 affect it and all? Juniad, I think the reason. I think. Oh wait. You said something else about gentrification. What was it? Is there any links to gentrification in universities, especially with accommodation and so forth? At least in my city, it seems like they. Yeah. Like they are. Yeah. No, there is. The reason that there's that similarity between gentrification and everything that I've been talking about this whole stream is because it's the same market forces that drive both of those, and that it's always like, oh, we want to have nicer buildings, we want to attract more customers, we want to attract higher paying or higher paying jobs or higher salary like making employees. We want to attract these people to our area, and so we're going to do that by consolidating a bunch of the old culture and buildings into some like hyper modern monstrosity that is super overpriced, that jacks the prices of everybody else who's already in the area. And think about what the fuck does a university professor need? Chalk and a chalkboard in a room with some chairs. But instead it costs you $60,000 to get like some FaceTime with these people. That's the hostage crisis I'm talking about. Just mind-blowing.
Disgusting!
Chalk and a chalkboard. They could get paid a decent fucking amount of money and still have their chalk and a chalkboard and focus on teaching students, but instead they're in meetings upon meetings upon meetings, and everything revolves around training up the next group of employees for Micron and Simplot, or if you're at UC Berkeley, I guess BP, as we talked about. So plan on becoming a teacher. Any advice? I think we'll come back to that one. For now, just be thinking about all of this. Rewatch this a couple times. Ask me more questions in the comments. Let's keep thinking about it as we move forward. As far as like what your possibilities are, you've got to do everything yourself, and you can't wait for other people to do things for you. And if you keep running into a problem where other people are needed, but then it takes them forever, don't wait. Learn how to do it yourself. That's the addition of labor. It's at this point we have to become sort of like, a jack of all trades, so to speak. Everybody has to. And so the idea of being that person who just gets to focus on physics your whole life, yeah, probably not. It's probably not going to happen. Parvati Valarba says, okay, should I even be going to college for a non-technical job if society is falling apart? So I did talk a lot earlier on about all of the different reasons why it still makes sense for some people and why it was the most important thing I did. But at the same time, I just spent so much time critiquing it that I think that if you rewatch the whole thing a couple of times, that will really help answer your question. But for now, I'll just say that while society is falling apart, might be the best time to go to college, because who knows? Maybe the debt that you're incurring will be irrelevant soon, because it'll either be forgiven or because everyone's going to go bankrupt and the banks won't have any meaning anymore, or because, I mean, that's a pretty extreme example. But, in the broader scheme of things, look, if you just go straight into the workforce, then you aren't you don't have that time and energy to develop your conceptual capabilities for really making sense of things, and you're always going to be busy and exhausted. And sure, you're going to have to take on a lot of debt to avoid doing that, but the debt does give you some time and energy to be able to focus on things that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so it's like you either have a debt to yourself for not doing it, or you have a debt to a bank for doing it. But that's a personal decision you have to figure out. But the reason that it might be the best time to do it in a university or right now, when the society is falling apart, here, I'll